Well, thanks very much. I'm excited to be here, part of RecFest. And in fact, I will be in RecFest in person in September. So I'd love to see everybody there in person, but today virtually will do. I want to chat with you today, first and foremost, about developing the voice of an industry, a brand. And I see a lot of organizations attempting to, and individuals attempting to, put out content in order to attract talent to their organization, if you're an organization, or in fact, build a brand as a search consultant or a headhunter out into the industry. And what seems to be missing is the attention to the reader. And everything that we do when we make these massive decisions in our lives, and when we switch a job or a career, that is a massive decision. It's generally one of which we fantasize about, who will I become? When I go to that organization, this is always the base layer in our psyche as we're reading anything, is who will I become? When we decide to get married, when we decide to go to a university, when we decide to take on a big new hobby, when we go to the gym, who will I become? And oftentimes, as content is put out there, we don't answer, who will I become? It ends up being self-serving from the company side, or the headhunter side starts to say, this is what I want. So let's keep that in mind as we go through some of the content today. Look, we know over the last decade, more things have changed than ever before, and especially so over the last 16 or 18 months with what the world's been through. Technology changes culture, it changes modes of communication, and it changes business processes. We know that. There's a current generation that understands that extraordinarily well. Unfortunately, there's a number of you in the audience, myself included, that we often have a generation above us that disrespect the power of brand, disrespect the power of social platforms. They don't want to agree with it, they misunderstand it. And while they don't have to agree with the facts, this is where we are today. So each of you continue your battle trying to have that generation above us understand that brand is not a dirty word. Establishing a brand is not a dirty word. Simply put, they will understand it's developing a reputation. And your reputation is critically important. And this is how I suggest that you process it and you explain it. Let's start over on this side. So I'm historically known as somebody who loves to build a brand, loves to build a reputation. And you can go from a subject matter expert up to a subject matter leader and eventually become the voice of an industry. And we'll dig into that a little deeper. On the information side, think about this as education. Is your efforts online should be more about educating and informing than it is about advertising. So, as you have a low brand or a low reputation, and as you scale up to subject matter expert and maybe a voice, the resistance is the highest when you're unknown, and the resistance drops off dramatically. The resistance meaning influence and your ability to immediately cut to the education of why you're speaking to somebody or actually trying to convince somebody. And the flip side too is when you're an unknown and when you have minimum education out in the market, your ability to influence and have gravitas is the lowest. And again, at the high end is when you've got your voice or your maximum educator. So keep this in mind as well. It's the reason why you want your brand and your education way up high, because resistance is the lowest when you're trying to influence and inform, and your gravitas is the highest. Right now, what's happening is in the job posting world, in the talent attraction world, there's a cacophony and noise going out. And what's occurring is people are just blasting the marketplace with information. It's causing a white noise that I talk about. This cacophony is now at a point where we're trying to do one thing. We're trying to filter out all the messaging, filter out the noise. I'm not sure on LinkedIn or other platforms how many times job postings are actually read. Now, the job postings that do get read, however, are the people who end up getting the signal above the white noise, the reputation and branding on the way that you deliver your content. Again, not just the job posting, but the way that you deliver your content. Branding is as important in any organization as any other function in it, and it's becoming very apparent today in the marketplace. Historically, branding was a folly. Historically, branding was an ego. And now it is what leads the charge in your ability to attract talent to your organization, or as a headhunter in order to get the attention of those in your market and drive the reputation. So it's on the same par as operations, R&D, customer service, accounting, sales, and marketing. And I have an asterisk next to marketing because on the marketing side, there's a very clear differential between marketing for developing a hiring brand and marketing for marketing a product or a service. Here's what you want to think in mind all the time. Your reader, your fans, your followers, your fanatics, I want to be involved in your company or your product either as an investor, a customer, or an employee. As you develop your content, your series, your chorus of messages, that's what you want to drive for. Now, how do we do that? We've employed a very simple, memorable approach to the initiative and the cadence and chorus of your messaging over time. And please keep in mind, the longitudinal execution of this is years. Okay? So don't think about it in weeks or months, but think about it in years. And we employ a hum, sing, shout strategy. And that hum, sing, shout graphically represented just like this. And you always have a low-level hum going on, which should be a content base of informing, educating, and inspiring. That should be on daily. And then also keep in mind, this could be on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, or what other channels. We've seen TikTok now start using that for job applications. So any of these platforms that's appropriate to your audience and the way they communicate on that platform, this should be what you keep in mind. Hum, sing, shout. Hum, steady, low, going on all the time, always ever present. The sing is a little bit of a higher cadence, a little bit of a higher amplitude, and from a frequency perspective, certainly not daily as often as the hum, but certainly a little bit less frequent, but with more powerful. And that may represent things like hiring opportunities, your organization in the press, addition of a key member, and then ultimately shout. Shout is really where you're trying to have a seismic approach on the market. Just like Sir Richard did this past weekend, right? That is an example of a shout initiative, but weeks leading up to that, there were hum, a low-level hum for months before. He started to increase the amplitude on his sing and ultimately delivered and over-delivered, as only he can do, on the shout strategy. So hum, sing, shout, super important. But what do you do within that hum, sing, shout strategy? These are the things you want to think about. You want to start to talk about your organization. Why does the market that it's in matter? Then you want to talk about your organization of how does that product in that market matter? And then who I will work with, and then why should I care about going to work at your organization? All the while keeping in mind that the question, the underlying question that person is always pulling on is, who will I become? Now, on the communication side, as you craft your messaging, long form, short form video, long form, short form copy, memes, whatever it is, you are going to be talking to multiple levels of that person. So let's discuss how those conversations need to be thought through. Oftentimes, I see the conversation exclusively at the today version of the person you're talking to. And that is the must-dos, must-have, responsibilities. What you need to think through is, how do I talk to the today version of the person who's taking in my content, but then how do I keep in mind the future version of who they want to be? Because ultimately, in order to attract that talent to your organization, they are always asking themselves subconsciously, who will I become? So critically important, as you come into our organization today, this is who you are. As you spend time in our organization and with our team and in this product and in this market, because the market is relevant for 5 years from now, Here is the future version of yourself. People are always doing this. Go over to the role. So now on the job posting, when you look at the job posting and the role, oftentimes we have the must-haves, the responsibilities, the qualifications. Awesome. That's great. That's what you want as the hiring manager or the hiring organization. But think through, what does that individual want? Here are the roles, responsibilities, and qualifications of what we want as the company. Having said that, I want you to start to add to that, here's why, the type of person who's important to execute on these. So again, you're speaking to the role oftentimes in your job postings and what you share online. You need to be talking to the individual about who will they become. We need these skills because you're going to be doing things like this, not just that we need these skills. May seem simple, but oftentimes I watch that opportunity fumbled. We also prescribe what we call the 4 pillars to our messaging. And invariably, there's always 3 of the 4 pillars in all the messaging that we do. So let me share with you our thoughts on what we believe influences on the short term and especially the long term. And it's also important to realize that in order for you to find the best people, it's going to take a very long time. Generally, the A players are not looking at job posting. Generally, the A players are busy, they're head down working, solving problems. However, if you start to educate, inform, and inspire over that hum, sing, shout strategy, they will start watching you. You just need to get the hook in once, and they'll continue to come back and watch you almost like a TV series, or a YouTube series these days is probably more appropriate, where they're coming back and watching what's going on in the company and imagining themselves on who they will become potentially if they were ever to join that organization. And so we take that strategy and wrap it into the 4 pillars. The first pillar, with a little more detail, is market. As you communicate this in the hum, sing, shout, it's layered. Remember that. You want to make the market, the conversation, independent of your company. This is not about you. This is about the market that your organization plays in and why that market over the next 3 to 5 years is relevant to who that person becomes. That relevancy could be, it's a breakaway technology. That relevancy can be a new way of doing business. That relevancy could be something that's a totally dislocated new model. But it's got to be exclusively around that market. Do not include your product in it. And the relevancy of that is, we believe, 3 to 5 years. Because people should be asking themselves, why would I bet my career on this emerging market? And how does it connect to the future version of myself? The second is the product. This is where you can start to get a little more self-serving, a little more myopic, and this is about us. But how you connect that is critical as well. So how does this product fit into, or service fit into, this market? So they start to build in each other. You talk about the market, then you talk the relevancy of that market and the importance of it over the next 3 to 5 years, and then you move into, here is why our product answers that bell, answers that need in that emerging market. The current solution is X, brand X is okay, but our product, as it relates to this emerging market, is preferred. And this is who you'll become and the skills you'll get from working on that. Now, team. Also, everybody wants to know, who am I going to work with? Your mom that told you this, your dad told you this, is who you hang around with is who you become. So how will you improve your network as working with these people? This is what you should be thinking about as you share your content and to the market. So you have to tell these people almost exclusively and blatantly, here is who you're going to work with. We believe who you work with is who you become. When you come to work here, this will become your network. Your professional network is critical to the success of your career. And this, how does this set you up for future roles? So the team you work with is who you become. The network you work with is who you're going to be able to connect with for the balance of your career if managed appropriately. And again, who will I become is the question that's answered. And then finally, we hear this a lot. It's I would call it an overused word at times, is mission. The mission mercenary mindset. This could be one of the most difficult to put into copy. However, you can evoke it with feelings and pictures more than copy. And this is, why do these people show up every day? Why do I jump on the train? Why do I pull the car into the parking lot? Why do I travel across the world in an airplane? Why do I want to change? What am I going to change? What do I stand for? Because after time, if you're showing up exclusively for a paycheck, exclusively for a habit, that will wear out. And oftentimes people want to be moved by a mission. We make decisions emotionally and then we justify them logically. So the mission, if you have a mission-driven opportunity with your product or service, think it through, because that is what will attract people. And then the rationalization is going to be the economics and the other parts that fit into their life. As you put together, now let's get down to the macro. We talked about macro now in regards to how we brand for hiring. Now let's cut down to perhaps the one-on-one, which is critically, you've loaded the top of your funnel with all your advertising. You've got the ideal person sitting in front of you or the team in your meeting, and now you're at the bottom of the funnel. You're trying to deliver them. Here is the closing opportunity, or the series of opportunities within closing. These points of influence, the 4 pillars: team, market, mission, product. Every individual, based upon where they are at that point in time, they're never equal. So think of these as hoops, as hula hoops that you're able to pull depending on what you've done well enough in your closing, in your moving them through the process. You've identified primary, secondary, tertiary interest of that individual. Now what you think you need to do is you need to start pulling in certain areas. Perhaps it's the team that's important to them, and you can connect that to their future-facing network or the core group they've been dying to get in touch with. Maybe it's the market. Maybe they're looking to jump the tracks to a new market, and this is attractive. So the point here is use these points of influence and have them be sort of front of mind as you take that individual through their hiring process. Voice of the industry. So I think this is probably one of the most powerful graphics that demonstrate how you can move from a beginner, which we have down here, but let's take it to a subject matter expert. Oftentimes people don't know how to make their first move online on digital. They don't understand how can they scale effectively, always asking for some tactics, techniques, some secret tricks. It doesn't work that way. Here's the easiest way it works. Is establish yourself as a subject matter expert in an analog fashion. If you're a headhunter or you're a representative of an organization, you have subject matter expertise that you can leverage. That now starts to need to find itself online. Be patient. You can eventually become a subject matter leader. This is where you teach, build, inspire, educate, infotain. That subject matter leadership and the subject matter expert in an analog fashion, it's 1 to 10, 1 to 5, 1 to 1. Once you start to get online, it's 1 to many, 1 to thousands, 10,000, some of you even millions, till eventually you become the voice of an industry. The voice of an industry is important. It has a huge responsibility with it, but it also carries the most gravitas out of any of these categories. So as you move through beginner mindset, subject matter expert, subject matter leader, voice of industry, this comes from a constant hum, sing, shout strategy of developing content out in the marketplace. Voice of an industry should be your sort of Valhalla that you're always driving for. And you make it about the audience, you do not make it about yourself. So who leads this charge and why? We chatted earlier about marketing. And this is where I see a lot of organizations make one of the biggest mistakes is they take their marketing function in their organization and simply think that marketing is a universal skill set and then try and apply it to marketing for a hiring brand. And they're two tremendously different skill sets. And that is where organizations will take that marketing person, put them online, and then doesn't quite work as well as they hoped. Either they didn't give it enough time, or there was a branding marketing mindset for a product or service trying to be applied on a branding marketing mindset for a hiring brand, attracting talent. and telling your organization's story, incorporating the 4 pillars. So there's the branding marketing as it relates to product, and then there's the branding marketing as it applies to brand strategy in your organization. Here's what I think about whenever we're developing a curriculum or a line or a strategy or a campaign for clients or for ourselves is we tell a story. Look, since the beginning of time, we've loved stories. We've sat around campfires, in loincloths. We've sat around pubs telling the best stories, and we've sat in a corporate environment telling stories. You've got to understand that you're a storyteller first and foremost. Then you have to write every day. The only way you become super competent and eventually great is writing every single day. Even if you don't feel comfortable, even if you feel like the post doesn't deserve to be put out, you need to put it out because you will learn from it. The only way you get better with your craft is writing every day, and especially respect your audience. Your readers deserve respect. You should write, you should think it through, you should rewrite, and eventually put that post online. Because what you want to do is you want to understand that when 2 companies have similar products, and even an inferior product that has better branding will always outperform a product that doesn't have good branding. You want to be current. You have to understand the platform that you're on, the reader's de facto mentality, how they want to take in information, how they want to see the information, short form video, long form video, copy. Remember, it's the same human being on 4 different platforms. So Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. Let's just use those 4. How I think on LinkedIn and want to take information is going to be different than how I bring it in on Facebook, is going to be different than I have it on Twitter. As I've mentioned before, think about LinkedIn as a learning platform, an educating platform. Facebook is a platform that is more of reconnection, alumnus, family. Twitter is bubblegum news. What I believe in the job market, the most ineffective platform. Nonetheless, it's something you should be active on, and there are ways to effectively use it. And then Instagram, think of it as a pretty lush magazine. It's almost escapism. That's where imagery really compounds its value. In addition, it also happens on LinkedIn. You're going to have a low ROI on your postings whenever you start. It's always going to be the worst. Right? But you have to be comfortable with being the fool before you become the master. And so practice. Be fearless on this. It's critically important. Do not go to ROI in the beginning. If you were in a corporation, you've got to preload this, pre-frame this for the leadership and say, look, this is going to take me 6 months to a year for me to really effectively influence. Because typically they're wired for a 30, 60, 90-day mindset. And so as you go in, you propose this, you bring in your budgets, you bring in your spend, you've got to prepare them that this is going to be a long process. Writing is an art. You have to look at it that way. You have to look at other artists, look at their cadence, look at their creativity, look at how their content comes out. I don't want you to copy them, but what I do want you to think about is taking things from that artist and then putting your own voice around it. It's very, very important. And then finally, this is an adventure. For those of you who are committed to the talent access world, the #1 thing you need to be working on is your writing skills, your communication skills on developing the brand and reputation of your organization or your practice. Remember, your reputation is what it is before you come to the room, so what precedes you, and then when you leave the room, what is the thought, how do they follow you after you leave the room? And that's going to require a tremendous amount of courage. And it's okay to be afraid. It's totally okay to be afraid because without fear, there is no courage. And so as you move forward on this journey and building the brand for your organization and yourself, you need to understand it's going to take an enormous amount of courage. You're going to have to be okay with being the fool in the beginning. You're going to have to take the finger pointing, the laughing as you start this out. Don't worry about it. It's less today than it was perhaps 5 or 6 years ago when all this started, but nonetheless, make it an adventure, have fun with it. And then finally, before I head out, always have lived by this. It's paid off extraordinarily well. keep this mindset whenever you're doing anything. But give, 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 without the expectation of receiving anything in return. But do take care of yourself, because you want to be waiting in plain sight when somebody does need something.